They laughed when the lawyer said her name. They laughed when he said what her husband had left her. When the words broken trailer and one box filled the room, it felt like a cruel joke echoing off the walls. But none of them understood. Not the smirking stepchildren, not the impatient relatives, not even the lawyer who kept his eyes down. That inside that forgotten trailer, hiding behind dust and silence, was something that would change everything they thought they knew, everything they believed about the man they had just buried, and everything they believed about the woman they had just dismissed. Evelyn Carter sat perfectly still as the will was read. Her hands rested neatly in her lap. Her face was calm in a way that almost looked like she had accepted it, though deep inside her chest, something heavy was sinking, something she could not quite name yet. 38 years. That was how long she had been married to Harold Carter. 38 years of shared mornings, quiet dinners, and sacrifices made without a single complaint. She had stood beside him when his business struggled, when money was tight, when the night stretched long with worry and doubt. She had truly believed that whatever they built together. But now, sitting in that cold office with its polished wood and hushed voices, it felt like she had been erased from her own life. The lake house will go to Daniel Carter, the lawyer read, his voice flat and professional. Daniel gave a small nod. He had already expected it. The rental properties will be transferred to Lisa Carter. Lisa let out a slow breath of satisfaction, her eyes sliding briefly toward Evelyn, not with sympathy, but with something much closer to dismissal. Investment accounts and liquid assets will be divided as outlined. After that, the words blurred together, but Evelyn understood enough. Everything of value, everything that looked like a lifetime of hard work. It was all going to them, not to her, not to the woman who had stood beside Harold through every uncertain year. Then came a pause, a slight change in tone that made everyone look up again. And to his wife, Evelyn Carter, the room went just a little quieter. Even Lisa leaned forward. He leaves the trailer located on Route 9, along with one personal box stored inside. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Lisa let out a short, sharp laugh before covering her mouth, as if she hadn't meant to let it slip. Daniel shook his head slowly, almost amused. "A trailer," he murmured. "That's something." Evelyn did not react on the outside, but her mind caught on that word immediately. The trailer. She remembered it only vaguely. It had been years since Harold mentioned it. Even longer since he had actually gone there. It was not a place of value. It was a leftover. Something old. Something he had once used and then forgotten. At least, that is what she thought. The lawyer slid a small metal key across the table toward her, along with a folded document confirming the transfer. "That concludes the will," he said quietly. And just like that, it was over. 38 years reduced to a key and a box that nobody else wanted. The meeting ended quickly after that. Chairs scraped back. Soft, hollow condolences were muttered without much feeling behind them. Within minutes, the room was emptying. Daniel and Lisa did not stay long. They had things to talk about, assets to manage, plans to make. Evelyn caught pieces of their conversation as they moved into the hallway. "We should list the lake house by next month. The rentals, we can refinance those." Not once did either of them look back at her. Not once did they ask if she was all right. Evelyn stayed seated for a moment longer, staring at the key in her hand. It felt heavier than it should have. Cold, final. Eventually, she stood, smoothed her coat as if that simple action could steady her, and walked out of the office into the pale afternoon light. The world outside moved on as if nothing had happened. Cars passed. People talked. The ordinary rhythm of a day that did not care about what had just been taken from her. That night, she barely slept. The house. No, not even her house anymore. She realized, felt unfamiliar. Every room carried a quiet echo of Harold. But now those echoes felt far away, almost out of reach. She kept thinking about the trailer, about the box, about the way Harold had chosen those specific things, and nothing else. It did not make sense. He had never been careless with decisions, never random. So why this? Why leave her something that looked so worthless? By morning, the question had sharpened into something different. Not confusion, not even hurt, curiosity, and just beneath that, the smallest flicker of something else entirely. She dressed quietly, picked up the key, and drove out toward Route 9. The road stretched long and empty, lined with dry grass and scattered trees, the kind of place people drove through without ever really seeing. When she finally spotted it, she almost drove right past. The trailer sat off to the side, slightly tilted, its once white paint faded and peeling. One window was cracked at the corner. It looked abandoned, forgotten. The steps creaked under her feet as she climbed them, and for just a moment she hesitated, her hand hovering near the door. This was it. This was what he had left her. She took a slow breath and unlocked it. The door opened with a low groan, as if it had not moved in years. Inside, the air was stale and thick with dust. Light came into the cracked window, falling across a space that felt smaller than she remembered. There was almost nothing there. A broken chair, an old bed frame with no mattress, a narrow table pushed against the wall, and on that table, a small wooden box. That was it. No note on the door, no explanation written anywhere, just a box. Evelyn stepped inside slowly, the floor creaking beneath her. Her eyes stayed fixed on it. "Is this really all?" she whispered, though there was no one to answer. The silence pressing around her, heavy and complete. For a moment doubt crept in. Maybe this was exactly what it looked like. Maybe Harold had simply chosen not to leave her anything more. That thought stung sharper than she expected. But something in her pushed back. Something refused to believe that after everything, after all those years, this was the end of the story. She moved closer to the table, her hand trembling just slightly as she reached out. The box was worn, its surface scratched with age, but it was intact, carefully placed, as if it mattered more than anything else in that room. Slowly, almost cautiously, Evelyn lifted the lid, and in that quiet, forgotten trailer, everything began to change. The box did not contain anything valuable in the way Evelyn's stepchildren would have recognized. No cash, no jewelry, nothing that looked like the kind of inheritance people fight over. But the moment she looked inside, that same quiet, unsettling feeling she had carried since the will was read came rushing back. The feeling that her husband had not left her with nothing. He had left her with something she was meant to figure out. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a small metal key with a thin tag attached. Evelyn picked up the paper first, unfolding it carefully. She expected a letter, some kind of explanation, anything that would make sense of the humiliation she had just lived through. But there was no message, at least not the kind she expected. Just a list of numbers written neatly in Harold's handwriting, coordinates, line after line of them, and at the very bottom, a single sentence, "You were the only one I trusted to understand." Evelyn read it twice, her brow pulling tight. Trusted her to understand what? This did not sound like him. Harold had never been vague or mysterious. He was practical, direct, a man who said exactly what he meant. And yet here she was, standing in a broken-down trailer, holding a puzzle instead of answers. She set the paper down and picked up the key, turning it slowly in her fingers. It was heavier than it looked, solid, important. The tag attached to it had 3 letters engraved on it, SBH. She did not recognize them, but something about them stayed with her, like a word she almost remembered but could not quite reach. Evelyn looked around the empty trailer one more time. Dust, silence, nothing else. And slowly, the confusion began to shift into something else. Determination. If Harold had left her this, it meant something, and she was not going to walk away without knowing what. The next morning, she followed the coordinates. The drive took her far beyond the familiar parts of town, past highways and long, quiet stretches of land she had never seen before, until she found herself pulling into an industrial district. Orderly, quiet, almost too quiet. She slowed the car, scanning the buildings as she passed, until one name made her breath stop. Silver Bay Holdings. Her hand tightened around the key. SBH. For a moment, she just sat there, the engine still running, her heart beating faster as the connection settled over her. "No," she whispered, but she already knew. This was it. She stepped inside. A man behind the front desk looked up with a polite but careful expression. "Can I help you?" he asked. Evelyn placed a paper and the key in front of him. "My husband owned this," she said quietly. "Harold Carter." The man glanced at the items, then at her. Something in his manner changed. He checked his system, then nodded slowly. "This unit has been under restricted access for over 20 years, he said. 20 years. The words hit harder than she expected. "I'm his wife," she replied. After a brief pause, he slid form across the counter toward her. "Then it belongs to you now." Minutes later, Evelyn stood in front of a numbered storage unit at the end of a long, echoing hallway. She hesitated for just a moment. Whatever Harold had hidden, whatever he had not told her all these years, it was behind this door. She took a steady breath and unlocked it. The door rolled open with a low, metallic sound. At first, it did not seem like much, just another storage space. But as she stepped inside and her eyes adjusted, everything changed. This was not clutter. It was organized, intentional. Filing cabinets lined one wall, each one locked. Crates were stacked neatly in the corners, sealed and labeled. Maps rested on a table, their edges worn as if they had been studied over and over again. There were bank boxes, document cases, and at the back of the room, a large steel safe that immediately pulled her attention. Evelyn stood still, her mind racing, as she opened the nearest cabinet. Documents filled it, property records, contracts, financial statements, all in Harold's name. Her breath caught as she flipped through them, her confusion turning into disbelief. These were not recent. The dates went back years, to times when Harold had told her money was tight, when he said they had to be careful, when she truly believed they were barely getting by. And yet right here was proof that something else had been happening all along, something he never told her. "Why didn't you say anything?" she whispered, her voice echoing softly in the stillness. Slowly, her gaze lifted and moved across the room until it landed on the safe. Something about it felt final, like everything in this room had been leading straight to it. Evelyn reached into her pocket, pulled out the key from the box, and stepped forward. Her heart was steady, but heavy, knowing that whatever truth Harold had left behind, it was waiting for her right there inside. The key turned more smoothly than she expected. The lock inside the steel safe clicked open with a quiet finality that seemed to carry all the way through the room. And for a moment, Evelyn simply sat there, staring, as if part of her was not quite ready for whatever was waiting inside. But she had not come this far to stop now. Slowly, she pulled the door open. Inside, there was no pile of cash, no big, dramatic treasure, just a neatly organized stack of documents and a single envelope placed on top, her name written across it in Harold's familiar handwriting. Evelyn reached for it first. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it. Her breath caught the moment she began to read. "Evelyn, if you're reading this, then you found it, and that means you didn't walk away." Her chest tightened instantly. "I know what it will look like. I know what it must have felt like. But I needed them to believe there was nothing left for you, because if they knew the truth, they wouldn't have waited. They would have taken everything before you even had time to think." Evelyn lowered the paper for just a second, her eyes filling with tears as the pieces finally began to come together. She looked around the room, at the documents, the records, the life Harold had quietly built and carefully hidden, and then she kept reading. "Everything here is yours. The properties, the accounts, the partnerships. I moved them quietly over the years, not to hide them from you, but to protect them for you." A tear slipped down her cheek as she read the next line. "The trailer wasn't your inheritance. It was the door." Evelyn let out a soft, unsteady breath, her hand pressing gently against the paper. "I needed to know that if everything looked like nothing, you would still look deeper, because you always did." The letter ended simply. Just one final line. "Now you finally have what they never deserved." Silence filled the space as Evelyn lowered the letter. But it did not feel empty anymore. It felt clear. For the first time since the will was read, since the laughter, since the quiet humiliation, everything made sense. Weeks later, when Daniel and Lisa realized the accounts they expected were not accessible, when the assets they believed were theirs did not exist the way they thought, they came looking for answers. But by then it was already done. Every document had been processed, every transfer secured. Everything Harold had carefully hidden was now legally and completely Evelyn's. When they finally stood in front of her, their confusion twisting into frustration and then into anger, demanding to know what had happened, Evelyn did not argue. She did not explain everything. She simply looked at them, calm and steady, and said, "You thought he left me nothing." She paused just long enough for the words to land. "He just made sure you saw it that way." And as they stood there, realizing too late what they had lost, Evelyn felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Not grief, not anger, not even revenge. Just quiet certainty. Because the truth was never in what Harold left behind in plain sight. It was in what he trusted her to find. If this story moved you, like it and share it so more people can hear it. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss what's coming next.